My parents announced that I wouldn't go to Lake Havasu with them this year. They said the car was too cramped. And 7 days later, I was scrolling through my Instagram feed and came across my mom's photo. The whole gang in identical t-shirts, laughing on the deck of a boat. The caption was a touching thank you to each participant in the trip. Everyone except me. I said nothing. And then their car stalled somewhere in Nevada. And my credit card suddenly stopped working. My dad was calling like crazy. Said NT7 missed calls. My sister sent an angry text, "Why the hell did you freeze the account?" At first I ignored their panic. But then I sent them $1 through Venmo with a note for clarity. I still can't wrap my head around what happened. My parents looked me straight in the eye when they told me there wasn't enough room in the car to drive to Havasu. At first I thought I had misheard. And I even waited for a pause. What if this was a joke and everyone would laugh? But no. Mother explained with a serious expression that they had to make a difficult decision about the seats. We decided that it would be good for you to be alone. My father picked up. Time for reflection. I sat there as if struck by lightning. This was absurd. I'm not some second cousin. I'm their son. And Lake Havasu is our sacred tradition. The one thing that remained intact while everything else in our family was falling apart. The pain seemed sharper than I expected. But I didn't make a scene. I just nodded slowly. Croaked out an understandable answer. And left the house. The moment the door slammed shut, the rage washed over me. And it wasn't the trip itself. It was that they said it out loud. I was the most unnecessary. The one who was easiest to cross out. The extra link. A week later. It got even worse. Chloe sent the first Instagram story. In the video, she and Tyler in stupid matching t-shirts, waving some idiotic margaritas right on the pier. I scrolled further. Parents. Aunt Megan. Uncle James. And a kid. This is what finally got me. A teenager I didn't know. After digging through the comments, I found out it was their friend's 14-year-old son. Some kid from the neighborhood. It turns out the guy urgently needed a change of scenery. And there was a place for him. But not for me. I stopped watching stories after my mom's post a group photo on a yacht. Everyone tanned and happy. The caption read, "Immeasurably grateful to each of them." This blow was especially painful. I stared at the photo for a long time. Then logged out of all social networks. Did not call. Sort things out. Or pour out grievances. Since I am a 10th class person for them. Let them feel the same way. The next evening, I remembered about the joint credit card. In theory, it was supposed to be used only in extreme cases. That's what we agreed on. The card was issued to me because I had an impeccable credit history. Everyone swore to spend as little as possible and pay off payments on time. Total lies. Over the past year, I've watched the bill swell: gas, groceries, plane tickets, and even Amazon orders that definitely weren't mine. I covered most of it out of my own pocket. Just to keep my credit rating. And now they're pulling up cocktails and writing cute posts while I pay for their entertainment. I went into the Chase app and froze the card. No warning. No explanation. Just pressed a button and walked out. The concert started in the morning. I was just feeding my dog when the first call came. Dad. Let it ring 3 times. Then again and again. 7 calls in the first hour. Then a break. Then a message from Chloe. You blocked the card. We're stuck, God knows where. I didn't answer. Went for coffee. Walked Max again. And by the time we got home, the missed calls counter had reached 27. Typical. My mother even managed to write an email. I didn't read it. Instead, I opened Venmo. Transferred them exactly $1, with the comment, "Sorry. I didn't have room for your money." Then I turned off the phone and went to bed. They returned the next evening. I knew about it because I was tracking their movements through Find My Friends. They forgot to remove me after my sister lost her phone on a camping trip last year. I watched the dot on the map creep toward me like a storm cloud. I hoped they would cool off in a few days. How wrong I was. At 7:43 p.m., someone started pounding on my door. Not knocking. Pounding. Like they were going to knock it off its hinges. Max stormed out of the living room and started growling at the door as if it owed him something. I saw them all through the peephole. My friendly family had returned from their heavenly vacation. Mother. Father. Chloe. Aunt Megan, and even Uncle James, who was standing aside as if he didn't understand how he got into this mess. At first I didn't open the door. I just watched. Chloe was really getting mad. My father was pacing the floor. My mother was clearly rehearsing a prepared speech. Tyler stood close to the door, as if preparing for a fight. And that made me laugh. Then my father pounded again. Open it now. I opened it. As soon as the door opened, they all came tumbling in, not waiting for an invitation. Max lunged at Tyler with such ferocity that he almost choked on his own barking. Tyler yelped and jumped back like a cartoon character. If I hadn't grabbed the dog by the collar, he would have definitely bitten his leg. Hold your dog, Tyler yelled. He's been trained not to like freeloaders, I replied. No one appreciated the joke. The mother was the first to get worked up. She immediately launched into a rant, drowning out everyone else. How irresponsible and mean it was to freeze the account when they were out of state. That it was dangerous. That I should have been thinking about my family. I kept quiet. Let her talk. It was all about their feelings anyway. My dad said I was being vindictive. Chloe, who had spent the entire trip posting high-flown nonsense about grateful hearts and sunsets, accused me of making them look like idiots in front of the hotel staff and the kids' parents. Aunt Megan said I should be ashamed. No normal person would do what I did. And then Tyler, who had only been in our family for a year but already thought he was blood-related, stepped forward and said, "If that's how you treat your own blood, maybe you're not worthy of being part of this family at all." I almost burst out laughing, staring at him for about 5 seconds before replying. "You're not family. You're just the only one who agreed to date her." He puffed himself up, ready to fight. Max growled again. Too bad I was holding the leash. The screaming continued. My apartment seemed to shrink. Unable to contain so much anger, I stood in the eye of the storm, listening to them hurl accusations, blame, and complaints. As if I hadn't spent the last year bailing them out of financial trouble while they pretended I didn't exist. No one apologized. No one acknowledged the scum they'd been in leaving me behind. Just endless whining about how I'd made them suffer. Finally, my patience snapped. "Get out. I'm not kidding. Get the hell out of my apartment." They filed out one by one. Chloe hissed something venomous. Tyler shot me a murderous look. Auntie Megan slammed the door so hard, the walls shook. Mother said nothing this time. Uncle James was the last to leave. He didn't look angry. More confused. He froze on the threshold, as if he wanted to say something. But he just nodded and left. When the door slammed, there was a deafening silence. I took Max for a walk. I left the phone at home. I don't care what messages were piling up there. Whatever they did next. I knew one thing this time: I wouldn't play by their rules. Complete radio silence. No calls. No messages. Nothing. The calm seemed unnatural. Like the calm before a hurricane. I was not deceived. I knew this was not the end. Saturday morning was unusually calm. I took Max for an early walk. We reached the park. On the way home I grabbed a sandwich. I returned with the feeling that perhaps the storm was already over. But as soon as I got close to my building, I sensed something was wrong. Someone had propped the front door of the building with a brick. It wouldn't close. This isn't an elite high-rise with a doorman. Just a regular 6-unit building with keypad entry and quiet tenants. But today there were dirty footprints on the stairs. Fresh footprints led up to my floor. I flew up the steps. The apartment door was closed, but not locked. And I always lock the door. No exceptions. Max growled before I could even reach for the handle. I pushed the door open and stood frozen in the doorway. They had settled into my apartment as casually as if they had lived here their entire lives. My mother sat at the breakfast bar, sipping coffee from my favorite mug. My father sprawled on the couch, sorting through a stack of my mail. Chloe was poking around on my iPad. Tyler was standing by the window, finishing the last of the pizza I'd saved from the night before. Aunt Megan had kicked off her shoes and was rubbing foot cream on her feet, making herself at home. Uncle James was lurking in the corner, clearly not thrilled by what was going on, but still an accomplice. At first, I just stood in the doorway, leash in hand. Max was rushing forward, barking so furiously that he looked like he was going to tear Tyler's throat out. I was holding him back for now. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? My father didn't even bat an eyelid. We needed to talk. You weren't answering your phone. So you broke into my apartment. We have a key. My mother interjected. You gave it to us. For emergencies. That's what emergencies are. She replied. An emergency. That you had to pay for your own gas in Nevada. They were all talking at once. My mother was saying I was overstepping my bounds. Chloe was calling me manipulative. Tyler was trying to play the alpha male again, fluffing his feathers like he was in charge. I barely resisted the urge to let Max go just out of curiosity. And then they played their trump card. You owe us for the kitchen. My father said. A few months ago. I let my parents get a credit card in my name. They were turned down everywhere. Another emergency that they promised to sort out. I knew about the food and gas bills. But they kept quiet about the $90 for a complete kitchen renovation. New cabinets. Wiring. Plumbing. A complete remodel that I wasn't even told about. That's a family expense. My mother said. You used that kitchen too. I haven't been in there in 10 months. I reminded her. My father got up from the couch. If you refuse to pay, you'll be turning your back on the family. Aunt Megan started preaching about how selfishness leads to loneliness. And Tyler, who still felt he had the right to speak, said, You'll regret doing that to your own blood. I looked around at them. No apology for abandoning me. No understanding. No one admitted they'd gone too far. They didn't care. They were angry only because they had lost power over me. Get out of here, I said. Or what? Tyler snorted. I didn't answer. Just went to the door. Opened it wide and pointed to the exit. 10 seconds until I call the police. 9. They reluctantly headed for the exit. Muttering something. Putting on their shoes and demonstratively slamming the door. My mother said I was acting like a stranger. Chloe said I was dead to her. Tyler said nothing. He was too busy dodging Max. Uncle James paused at the threshold. Looked like he wanted to say something. But just turned and left. As soon as the door closed behind them, I called a locksmith. By evening, the locks were new. Then I sat down with the documents. Collected all the receipts for the card. Purchases I had not made. Photos of that very kitchen, where I had not been for almost a year. Correspondence. Emails. Screenshots. I called Bank of America and reported fraud. 5 days later, I got a response. The transaction was canceled. The $90 was written off in full. Now the collection would come directly from them if they didn't pay. The credit history problems would be theirs, not mine. I leaned back on the couch and allowed myself to smile. Max jumped up next to me, still sniffing the air, as if he was waiting for them to return. But they weren't coming back yet. That wasn't the end of it. Though, they just lost access to my money. Now they were going to lose the rest of their control. 2 days after the $90 was written off, the family group chat came alive for the first time in weeks. I'd turned off notifications long ago. But the messages were piling up like ashes after a fire. Chloe started it. We need to talk. Seriously. It's about Dad. Then my mother. Can we come over just for 10 minutes? Chloe again. He could lose his job in 10 days. Please. Just hear us out. I didn't open the messages. I knew there was manipulation. Pity. Fake concern. They weren't remorseful. They were just being pushed into a corner. But the mention of Dad's job got to me. At lunchtime, I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then listened to it. It was from the HR department of my father's company. It turns out that when Bank of America marked the transaction as fraudulent, his office was listed as the billing address. This became the reason for an internal investigation. My father was sent on administrative leave. That night, Chloe bombarded me with messages. You've gone too far. This is your fault. You're ruining Dad. How could you do this to us? I didn't answer. I knew if I opened that door even an inch, they'd come pouring in like water breaking through a dam. I'd had enough. I'd had enough of bleeding for my family. Enough of sorting out their problems, financial or otherwise. Around 9:00 there was a knock on the door. Not a pounding. Just 2 quiet knocks. Through the peephole I saw Uncle James. He was standing there with a 6-pack of Budweiser and a bag of Chipotle. I opened the door without a word. Just stepped back, letting him in. He sat on the edge of his chair, as if he wasn't sure he wouldn't be thrown out. "I'm not trying to fix anything," he began. "I'm just letting you know the truth. You deserve it." He didn't beat around the bush. He just laid it out like it was. The 14-year-old kid on the trip wasn't the neighbor's son, he was Tyler's little brother. The kid's parents were getting a divorce. It was bad. And Chloe decided it would be honorable to take him along. Convinced your mother, it would make them look good. A charitable gesture from a close-knit family. Dad didn't care. So they made room for the boy. At your expense. They knew you'd be mad, Uncle James said, looking at his palms. They just decided it was too much trouble to deal with. He shook his head. I was against all this. But I went anyway. I thought I could bring them to their senses. It didn't work. I kept quiet. I appreciated his honesty. But it didn't change anything. They made a choice. They weren't wrong. They chose. And choices have consequences. That night, Chloe posted something passive-aggressive on her Instagram story. Black screen. White text, "You think you're punishing us. But you're only punishing yourself. Family is forever. Until you reject it." I blocked her. Then my mother. Then my father. Only Uncle James the first. I took Max for an evening walk. And for the first time in a long time, the air seemed fresh. I didn't know what they would do next. But there was no longer any fear. Now they were losing control. Blocking them didn't stop them. They started showing up in person. Chloe was the first to arrive. 2 days later, I watched through the peephole as she paced the landing, clearly rehearsing her speech. She knocked. Waited. Knocked again. I didn't open the door. She slipped a note under the door. "You're not acting like a family member. You're acting like an offended stranger. Be above it." I didn't even finish reading it. I crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. The next evening, my mother arrived. I watched from my window as she sat in her car outside my building for almost half an hour. She never came to the door. She just stared at my windows, probably hoping I'd look out. I noticed. And I didn't care. By Friday, the silence had become unnatural. Too measured. And then a text came from an unfamiliar number. "I'd advise you to check your credit rating." And no, it wasn't me. "But I warned you, you started it yourself." He was clearly trying to get on my nerves. I almost ignored him. But the phrase caught my attention. I opened the Credit Karma app. And there it was. 2 days ago. New credit applications from a Home Depot and a contractor in my name. Someone was trying to open new lines of credit. I froze. It wasn't enough for them to squeeze everything out of my card. They tried to issue new ones using my data. Still sucking money out of me. After everything that happened, I called the bank. Blocked everything. Fraud report. Full report. Confirmed. The requests came from my parents' IP address. At that moment, something in me finally snapped. It was no longer about the vacation. Or the money. Or the grievances. They continued to rob me. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. Instead, I did one thing. I printed everything: the fraudulent applications, the screenshots of the correspondence, the kitchen bill, the record of my father's troubles at work, all the correspondence with the bank. I put it all in an envelope without a single word and left it at their door. Let the facts speak for themselves. Uncle James called at midnight. No greeting. No questions about how I was feeling. Just said, "They've completely lost it. Your dad is threatening to sue you for harassment. Your mom thinks you're ruining the family. Chloe blames you for her dad's problems at work. And Tyler is adding fuel to the fire." I was silent. And then he said something unexpected. "I think you should stop opening your doors to them. Not just now. Forever." "Why?" I asked. He sighed heavily. "Because today, Chloe said something that made everyone silent. She said that you ruined everything. And the only way to make you pay is to ruin something of yours." What does this mean? I don't know. But it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a plan. I looked at Max, sleeping peacefully on the carpet. I'd had enough. 3 days passed in eerie silence. No visits. No messages. But I didn't relax. I started locking the door with all the locks. Even when I was home, Max didn't leave my side for a second. Every night I checked the Ring doorbell camera. Stopped putting my phone on silent. And then it happened. 2:00 a.m. A notification. Movement at the front door. I opened the app and stared at the screen. Them. Chloe. Tyler. And my mother. With trash bags. One containing what looked like shredded paper. The other containing tools. I watched silently as Tyler crouched down and began fiddling with the lock. I dialed 911 without hesitation. No warning this time. They hadn't gotten far. By the time the first patrol arrived, they'd already damaged part of the lock and filled the keyhole with superglue. Someone, most likely Chloe, had tried to stick a sign to the door. It read, "You deserve to live alone." When the police asked if I was going to file a report, I didn't hesitate for a second. Yes. They were arrested on the spot. The mother begged me to explain to the officers that it was a misunderstanding. Tyler tried to pass it off as a bad joke. Chloe was silent. Red as a lobster. Her arms crossed over her chest. Like a schoolgirl caught red-handed. I signed the report. That was the last time I saw them. Their lawyer called in the morning. Some family friend trying to hush up the matter. Said they didn't want an escalation. Asked what I wanted. "I'll think about it." I replied and hung up. 2 days later, I sent them a letter. Inside was a printout of the kitchen bill, for $90. "This is no longer my problem. Please sort it out yourselves as a family." I also included brochures from credit monitoring services and warned them, "If you use my information again, the next conversation will be with the prosecutor." And then I did something they didn't expect from me. I blocked all the numbers: my mother, my father, Chloe, Tyler, Megan, everyone. All the emails. All the social networks. I deleted the family group chat completely, leaving only Uncle James. Weeks passed. One evening, he called. "I want you to know. They say you're not their son anymore. Your mother said she only has one child now, Chloe." I waited for a note of regret in his voice. There was none. They won't admit it out loud. But they know they screwed up big time. You were the one taking care of them, paying for them, cleaning up their messes. And they chose someone else. "I'm sorry." I kept quiet. Then said, "I'm not mad anymore. I've just had enough." And it was true. I still live in the same apartment. Max is still with me. Still hates everyone but me. I started going on short weekend trips. No matching t-shirts. No group photos. Just peace. Sometimes I see their faces on Facebook or in pictures from events. I scroll through them like photos of strangers. Because now they are strangers. And I am fine with that. 2 weeks passed. Life finally started to improve. I changed all the cards. Updated the passwords. Installed a new, more secure smart lock. And stopped looking back. Max and I have our own rhythm: morning walks, quiet evenings. No more family squabbles. I started sleeping normally again. And then something unexpected happened. A letter arrived. Handwritten. With no return address. The handwriting seemed vaguely familiar. I opened it slowly, expecting another round of reproaches or manipulation. But the letter turned out to be from the same 14-year-old boy from the trip. His name was Liam. Until that moment, I didn't even know his name. The letter was short, but it was pointed. "Hello. I know you probably don't want to get letters from someone connected to them. But I had to write. When we were in Arizona, I didn't understand what was going on. Now I understand. I thought they were helping me. Turns out they were just using me to look noble. I didn't even want to go. I asked where you were. And your sister said you were too dramatic to take along. I want you to know." I felt awkward then, and I feel awkward now. No reply address. No phone number. Just that. I was stunned. I never thought about the kid after that whole story. He was just living proof that I was nothing to them. And now he writes with the wisdom of an adult, what my family couldn't say. But that wasn't all. 2 days later, an email arrived. Anonymous from a temporary address. No text. Just an attachment. It opened to a screenshot of a private group chat between Chloe, Tyler. And my mother. The group was called Spring Cleaning. The messages were dated days before the superglue incident. They planned it all out, not impulsively, but methodically. How to get into the building. What to tell the police. Who carries the bags. Sickeningly and calculatedly. At the end of the screenshots. One line. Thought you should see what a real family looks like. There was no signature. But something was hinting this was Uncle James. Maybe he came across the screenshots, maybe Liam forwarded them. Either way, someone wanted me to know. It's not about resentment. It's about the fact that I finally saw everything clearly. I sat for a long time after that. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I just felt that this time it was really all over. Story 2. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Alice woke up in her narrow bed at the residential facility and felt something inside her change. Not outwardly, she was still a thin girl. With dark hair and gray eyes that seemed to have seen too much for their age. Something elusive had changed. As if the invisible chains that had held her all her life had finally broken. Today she was supposed to meet with the attorney Samuel P. Crawford. Grandfather's will was to go into effect on this very day. Alice remembered her grandfather. He died when she was only 7 years old. A tall man with kind eyes and calloused hands who always smelled of tobacco and motor oil. He worked at Ford Motor Company all his life. But he knew how to save money and one day bought a small house in suburban Detroit. After her parents died, her mother died in childbirth. And her father drank himself to death from liver cirrhosis when Alice was 10. She was placed in the care of the state. Her relatives then unanimously declared that they could not take her in. Aunt Rita allegedly had no space. Uncle Victor cited financial difficulties. And cousins Paul and Igor were still too young and unsettled in life. But Alice remembered how they all gathered in her grandfather's house after his funeral. She remembered their greedy looks when the attorney read the will. She remembered how angry they were when they found out that everything went to her. A 7-year-old girl. And that she would only be able to receive the inheritance when she turned 18. Until that moment, the house was supposed to stand empty. And the money was supposed to remain in Bank of America, earning interest. It's not fair. Aunt Rita screamed then. I'm his own niece. And this girl doesn't even know what money is. Uncle Victor remained grimly silent. But Alice saw him clench his fists. Paul and Igor whispered in the corner, throwing unkind glances at her. In 11 years at the residential facility, Alice never received a letter, a gift, or even a birthday greeting from them. It was as if they had forgotten about her existence. But yesterday, when there was only one day left until she came of age, Aunt Rita unexpectedly arrived at the facility. Alice. Honey. She exclaimed with false joy, hugging her niece. How you've grown, you've become a real beauty. Alice silently listened to her lament about how she missed her. How she wanted to take her to her place. But circumstances did not allow it. Rita brought a cake from Walmart, and a gift cheap jewelry that wasn't even in a proper box. Tomorrow is an important day for you, said the aunt. And metallic notes flashed in her voice. Finally, you will receive your grandfather's inheritance. But, you know, my dear, such money is a big responsibility. Maybe you should think about sharing it with your family. Alice looked at her carefully. Greedy lights danced in Rita's eyes. I'll think about it, the girl answered calmly. Of course. Of course. Auntie hastily agreed. Just don't rush into decisions. And now I have to go. But we'll definitely see each other very soon. Very soon, she repeated in a strange tone. After she left, Alice sat in her room for a long time, thinking about the visit. Something about her aunt's behavior was alarming. This display of family feelings was too sudden. Now, waking up on the day of her coming of age, Alice once again replayed yesterday's conversation in her head. No. Something was definitely wrong. Rita had never been a good actress. And her attempts to play the loving aunt were unconvincing. Alice got out of bed and went to the window. The gray October morning in Detroit was colorless. But for her this day was special. Today, she would finally gain independence. She would be able to leave the facility, go to college, and start an independent life. Footsteps were heard in the hallway. Someone stopped at her door and knocked softly. Alice. A familiar voice rang out. It's me. Igor. Your cousin. Alice frowned. What was he doing here so early in the morning? He had never come during her entire stay at the facility. Can I come in? Igor asked. I need to talk to you. Alice hesitated for a second. Then opened the door. Igor looked worried. He was only 3 years older than her. But he seemed much more mature. Tall. Broad-shouldered. With dark hair and serious brown eyes. What happened? Alice asked. Igor looked around, making sure no one could hear them. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. It concerns your inheritance. Alice's heart began to beat faster. What exactly? Not here. Igor shook his head. Let's go to the park behind the facility. We'll talk there. They left the building and headed toward a small park. The morning was cold, and Alice shivered in her thin sweater. Igor walked next to her silently, clearly collecting his thoughts. Finally, they reached an old gazebo in the depths of the park, where no one would hear them. Listen carefully. Igor began, looking straight into her eyes. What I'm about to tell you may seem crazy, but it's the truth. Last night I accidentally overheard a conversation between Mom, Uncle Victor, and Paul. And what did you hear? They're planning your death, Igor said in a tone as if he were talking about the weather. Alice felt the blood drain from her face. For a few seconds, she couldn't say a word. What did you say? They want to kill you and take your inheritance. They've already planned it all. Today, when you go to the attorney to process the documents, an accident is supposed to happen. Alice sat down on the bench in the gazebo. Her legs gave way. This is impossible, she whispered. We are relatives. You are not relatives to them. Igor smiled bitterly. You are an obstacle to money. They believed that grandfather unfairly passed them over in the will. All these years they had been angry and jealous. And now that you are finally receiving your inheritance, they have decided to act. But how? How are they going to do it? Igor sighed heavily. Uncle Victor works for the city's Department of Public Works. He has access to heavy equipment. They want to cause an accident on the road to the attorney's office. It should look like an accident. The bulldozer will accidentally hit a utility pole. The pole will fall right on the car you're riding in. Alice listened and couldn't believe her ears. Could her own family really do something like that? Paul went there yesterday and studied the route. Igor continued. He chose a suitable place. The road there goes under the power lines. If the pole falls at the right moment. How do you know all this? Alice interrupted him. I came to my mother's house yesterday evening. I wanted to borrow some money until payday. I heard voices from the kitchen and decided to wait in the hallway. And they were just discussing the plan. Thinking that no one was home. Alice shook her head. But why are you telling me? After all, if their plan succeeds, you will get the money too. Igor looked at her with pain. Because I'm not a murderer, he said quietly. And because I'm ashamed that my family is capable of such a thing. Grandpa was a good man. He earned this money honestly and had the right to leave it to whoever he wanted. And you are not guilty of anything. You just want to live your life. Tears came to Alice's eyes. Suddenly, in this cold world, she had an ally. What should I do? She asked. I still need to go to the attorney. Without my presence, the will won't come into effect. I thought about it all night. Igor said. I have a plan. But first I need to contact someone. He took out his iPhone and dialed a number. Hello? Mr. Peterson. This is Igor Sokolov. Remember? I worked construction for you last summer. I urgently need your help. No. Not money. It's much more serious. Alice listened to the one-sided conversation, trying to understand who her cousin was talking to. Okay. We'll be there soon. Igor finished the conversation and put the phone away. Who was that? Alice asked. Michael Peterson. A former police detective. Now, a private investigator. I worked for him last summer on renovating his house. He's a good man. And I think he will help us. And if he doesn't help, if he doesn't believe, he will. Igor said confidently. I have proof. He showed Alice the phone. Yesterday evening. When I realized what they were planning, I turned on the voice recorder and recorded part of their conversation. It's not everything, but enough to understand their intentions. Alice felt hope flare up in her chest. Maybe not all was lost. Maybe she had a chance. But even if we go to the police, she said, they'll need proof of the attempt. And so far, they haven't done anything. That's why we're going to Mr. Peterson. Igor explained. He knows how to act correctly in such situations. He has connections in law enforcement. They hurriedly headed for the exit from the park. Alice walked quickly. But her head still couldn't wrap around what was happening. Just yesterday, she was an ordinary facility resident, dreaming of an independent life. And today it turned out that her family wanted to kill her. Igor, she said, as they reached the road. What if this is all a lie? What if you're lying to me? He stopped and looked at her seriously. Then you'll only lose time. But if I'm telling the truth, you could lose your life. Is it worth the risk? Alice nodded. He was right. Better safe than sorry. They called an Uber and went to the other side of Detroit. To where Michael Peterson lived. On the way, Igor told Alice what he knew about this man. He worked for Detroit police for 20 years. Dealt with complex cases, murders, fraud. Then he retired and opened a private investigation agency. They say he knows his business very well. And why did he agree to help us? I don't know. Maybe because we are young and defenseless. Or maybe he just doesn't like injustice. We'll see. Michael Peterson lived in a renovated loft in downtown Detroit. They went up to the 4th floor and rang the doorbell. A man of about 50. Of average height. With penetrating gray eyes. Opened the door. He carefully examined them from head to toe. Come in, he said, and led them into a small office space. The apartment was modestly furnished, but very clean and organized. There were photographs on the walls. One of them showed Peterson in a police uniform. So, the owner said, sitting them down on chairs. Igor, you said that it was a matter of life and death. Explain. Igor briefly explained the whole situation. Peterson listened silently, only occasionally asking clarifying questions. When the story was over, he asked to listen to the recording. The voices on the phone sounded muffled, but the words could be made out. The pole must fall at exactly the right moment. Make it look like an accident. Then the inheritance will pass to us. Peterson frowned. I see, he said. The situation is serious. But there isn't enough evidence to initiate a criminal case. We need to catch them red-handed. How can we do that? Alice asked. There are several options. But first tell me, do you really want to see this through to the end? Do you understand that your relatives are facing prison? Alice thought. These people wanted to kill her. For the sake of money. They were ready to take the life of a girl who had done nothing bad to them. Yes, she said firmly. I want to. Good. Then here is my plan. Peterson stood up and began to pace the room, thinking about the situation. Your relatives are planning to cause an accident on the road to the attorney's office, he said. So they know when and where you will go. This is our chance to catch them. But what if we put Alice in harm's way? Igor began. No one is putting her in harm's way. Peterson interrupted. We'll arrange a simulation. Alice will go to the attorney. But not along the route they expect. Another woman, similar in appearance to her, will go along the usual road. There will be police officers in the car posing as driver and escort. What if something goes wrong? Alice worried. It won't. We'll have time to get ready. It's already 10:00 a.m. And you have to be at the attorney's at 3:00 p.m. We have 5 hours. Peterson picked up the phone and dialed a number. Detective Anderson. This is Peterson. I need your help. It concerns attempted murder. Yes. Seriously. Can you come? Okay. I'm waiting. After hanging up, he turned to Alice and Igor. This is my former colleague, Detective Sergeant Kate Anderson. She'll come now. We'll discuss everything and draw up an action plan. While they waited, Peterson asked Alice about her relatives, their characters, habits, and capabilities. It turned out that Uncle Victor really did work for the Department of Public Works and had access to heavy equipment. Paul worked as a mechanic at a Jiffy Lube and knew a lot about cars. Aunt Rita worked at City Hall and could have found out details about the will. A family business. Peterson grinned grimly. Everyone makes their contribution to the crime. Half an hour later. The doorbell rang. A woman of about 40 in a business suit with attentive brown eyes stood on the threshold. It was Detective Anderson. Peterson briefed her on the matter. The detective listened attentively to the recording and asked several clarifying questions. There really is little evidence, she said. But if we catch them in the act of attempted murder, it will be an airtight case. I agree to the operation. What's our plan? Igor asked. Simple, but effective, the detective answered. Alice is going to the attorney by an alternate route, accompanied by my people. A car with my colleague, Detective Maria Santos. We'll go along the main road, where the ambush is planned. She's about the same height and build as Alice. She'll put on a wig and sit in the back seat, so that she can be seen from a distance. But you can't see her face clearly. But what if they realize the substitution? Asked Alice. They won't. They will act from a distance, using heavy equipment. They won't have time to see who exactly is sitting in the car. Okay, agreed Alice. And what should I do? Go to the attorney and calmly process the documents, said Peterson. We'll take care of your relatives. Detective Anderson left to prepare the operation. Peterson suggested that Alice and Igor stay with him until the time of departure. You shouldn't show up at the facility, he explained. The relatives might be watching. Let them think that everything is going according to plan. Time dragged on slowly. Alice was nervous and couldn't find peace. Igor tried to calm her down, telling her about his work and plans for the future. Peterson was preparing documents and calling lawyers he knew. At 1:30 p.m. Detective Anderson called. Ready, she said. Maria is already en route. Our people have taken up positions. As soon as the criminals make an attempt, we will detain them. Excellent, said Peterson. We're leaving for the attorney. They got into Peterson's car. A reliable Honda Accord. Alice settled into the back seat. Igor sat next to her. They drove through streets that Alice's relatives hadn't predicted for their route. Don't worry, said Igor, taking Alice's hand. Everything will be fine. What if something goes wrong with Detective Santos? Asked Alice. What if they kill her? They won't, Peterson reassured her. An experienced officer is driving with her. They're wearing bulletproof vests. And as soon as the operation begins, our people will immediately detain them. The attorney's office was located in downtown Detroit, in an old renovated building. Samuel P. Crawford, the same attorney who had read their grandfather's will 11 years earlier, met them in his office. He was an elderly man with a gray mustache and kind eyes. Alice, he exclaimed, seeing the girl. How you've grown. Do you remember me? Of course I remember. Mr. Crawford. Alice smiled. You gave me a candy when I was crying. Yes. Yes. I remember. It's been a difficult time for you, little one. But now everything will change for the better. He took a folder of documents from the safe. Your grandfather was a wise man, the attorney said. He foresaw that relatives might try to challenge the will or somehow prevent you from receiving the inheritance. So he drew up a very detailed, legally impeccable will. What exactly was left to me? Alice asked. The house at 47 Maple Street with all the property in it, as well as a cash deposit at Bank of America in the amount of $31. Ling ling ling. With interest over 11 years, the amount has grown to $40. Ling ling ling. Alice gasped. She knew that her grandfather had left her money, but she had no idea that the amount would be so substantial for someone her age. That's a lot, she whispered. Your grandfather worked and saved all his life, the attorney said. He lived modestly, denied himself everything to ensure your future. He loved you very much. Tears came to Alice's eyes. She remembered her grandfather, his kind hands, the smell of tobacco, the quiet voice with which he told her stories. What do I need to sign? She asked. The attorney laid out several documents on the table and explained each one in detail. Alice read them carefully and asked questions. Peterson and Igor sat nearby, ready to help with advice. While the documents were being processed, Peterson's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and answered Anderson. Yes. I'm listening. What I understand. Okay. We'll wait. He hung up and turned to the others. The operation was a success. All three were caught red-handed. What exactly happened? Igor asked. Uncle Victor had indeed driven a bulldozer to the power lines. When the car with Detective Santos approached the right place, he tried to knock down the pole. But our people were ready and detained him right at the controls. Paul and your Aunt Rita were nearby, coordinating his actions via walkie-talkies. They were arrested too. Alice felt a heavy weight lift from her soul. Finally, it was all over. She was safe. And the criminals had gotten what they deserved. What will happen to them, she asked. Attempted murder for financial gain, said Peterson. That's a serious charge. Each of them will definitely go to prison for 10 to 15 years. Fair enough? Alice said quietly. The paperwork took another hour. When everything was ready, the attorney solemnly handed Alice the keys to her grandfather's house and the title deeds. Congratulations, Alice, he said. You are now the rightful owner of the inheritance. I wish you happiness and wisdom in managing this wealth. Leaving the attorney's office, they met Detective Anderson. She looked satisfied. It's in the bag, she reported. All three have been detained. Evidence has been collected. There are witnesses. Tomorrow they will be brought to court for arraignment. I think they'll serve a long time. Thank you very much, said Alice. If it weren't for you, I would be dead now. The detective smiled. This is our job. Well done. You weren't afraid to see it through to the end. And now, said Peterson, I suggest we go and look at your house. Alice, it's time to get acquainted with your new home. The house turned out to be small, but cozy. 2-story, with an attic, surrounded by a small yard. Over 11 years. It had, of course, become run down. The paint on the fence had peeled off. Weeds had grown in the garden. Some of the windows were boarded up. But overall, the structure looked solid. No problem. We'll fix it up, Igor said, looking at the facade. I'll help you with the repairs. The inside of the house also needed attention. But the furniture was in pretty good condition. Grandpa had bought quality things that lasted. In the living room, there was a large oak table, where the whole family used to gather. Old photographs hung on the walls. In one of them, Alice recognized her parents in their youth. You can live here, she said, looking around the rooms. You just need to fix it up a bit and clean it up. Of course you can, Peterson agreed. And you have enough money for the repairs. In the meantime, you can stay with me if you don't want to go back to the facility. Thank you. But I want to move here as soon as possible, Alice said. This is my home. Grandfather wanted me to live here. That evening they returned to Peterson's place. Alice felt exhausted after all the events of the day. On the one hand, she had finally received her inheritance and escaped death. On the other hand, she learned what her relatives were capable of. Don't be sad, Igor said, noticing her mood. The most important thing is behind you. Now you have a home, money, the opportunity to study. Life is just beginning. Yes, you're right, Alice agreed. But it still hurts to realize that the people I considered family were ready to kill me. They were never your family, said Peterson. Family is the one who loves you and cares about you. They thought only about money. And you and Igor took a risk for me. Although I am practically a stranger to you, noted Alice. Not a stranger. Igor shook his head. We are cousins. And I couldn't let anything happen to you. Alice looked at him with gratitude. It turns out that she does have a real family. Albeit small, but honest and kind. The next few days were spent in preparation. Alice officially checked out of the residential facility, moved her few things to her grandfather's house, and began planning the renovation. Igor helped her with everything. Chose materials, looked for contractors, and made estimates. Their relatives were brought to court. Alice went to the hearing to look them in the eyes. Aunt Rita tried to justify herself, claiming that they only wanted to scare her, not kill her. Uncle Victor was silent and looked at the floor. Paul looked angrily at Alice, as if she was to blame for their arrest. The defendants are charged with attempted murder for financial gain, the judge read, taking into account the gravity of the crime and the evidence presented. The court sentences Rita Sokolov to 8 years of imprisonment. Viktor Sokolov to 10 years. Paul Sokolov to 9 years of imprisonment. Alice listened to the verdict without emotion. Justice had prevailed. The people who wanted to kill her got what they deserved. After the trial, Igor was waiting for her. "Well? Now we can live in peace," he said. "Yes." Alice agreed. "Now we can." They went home to grandfather's house, which was gradually becoming cozy. The workers had already replaced the windows, painted the walls, and fixed the roof. Alice chose a room on the second floor with a window overlooking the yard. "What are you going to do next?" Igor asked over dinner. "I'll go to college," Alice said. "I want to study law. After everything that happened, I understand how important it is to know the laws and be able to protect your rights." "Great idea," Igor approved. "And I'm thinking about starting my own business. A construction company. Maybe. I have experience. And now I'll have some startup capital. You wouldn't refuse to lend your cousin some money, would you?" Alice laughed. "Of course I wouldn't refuse. We're family." 6 months had passed since those dramatic events. Spring had arrived in Detroit, and the garden around Grandpa's house was in full bloom. Alice stood by the window of her room and admired the apple trees that Grandpa had planted many years ago. White and pink petals swirled in the air, creating a fairy tale atmosphere. The house was transformed beyond recognition. Igor turned out to be an excellent renovation organizer. He found reliable contractors who brought the building into order efficiently and affordably. The walls were painted in warm tones. The floors were refinished. All the plumbing and electrical were replaced. New flower beds were laid out in the garden, and the overgrown paths were cleared. Alice enjoyed furnishing her home. She kept her grandfather's furniture, but added modern elements: a new TV, a laptop, a comfortable chair for reading. In the living room, she hung a portrait of her grandfather, which she found among his things. Every time she passed by, she mentally thanked him for his care and foresight. Admission to Wayne State University was successful. Alice chose the law program at one of Detroit's best universities. Her studies came easily. The years at the facility had taught her independence and responsibility. The professors noted her abilities and diligence. "You have good prospects," the dean, Professor Robert M. Johnson, once said. "With such results, you can count on graduating summa cum laude and continuing to law school." "Thank you," Alice replied. "I really want to become a good lawyer, to help people protect their rights." She didn't forget about Peterson, who helped her at the most difficult moment of her life. Once a week, Alice visited him, brought homemade cookies, and told him about her studies. The former detective became almost like family to her. "You've changed a lot," he once remarked. "You've become more confident." "Calmer. Probably because now I have a home and a purpose in life," Alice replied. "And most importantly, I know that I can protect myself if necessary." Igor didn't stand still either. He really did organize a construction company and quickly found clients. Quality work for reasonable prices. This approach brought him a good reputation. Alice lent him $5,000 to buy tools and materials, and he honestly repaid the debt in installments. "I'll pay it off in full in a year," he promised. "And then I'll start saving for my own apartment." "Don't rush," Alice laughed. "There's enough space in this house for two." Indeed, Igor often stayed overnight with her, especially when he worked at nearby sites. They became a real family, supported each other, shared plans and problems, celebrated holidays together. Peterson came to them for Thanksgiving. The three of them sat at the large oak table that still remembered grandfather's times, and made plans for the future. "I want to open a legal aid clinic." Alice shared her dreams. "To help people who cannot afford expensive lawyers." "A noble goal?" Peterson approved. "And I can become your partner. A private investigator and a lawyer are a good combination." "Excellent idea," Igor supported. "And I will handle the construction and renovation of your offices." They toasted with apple cider, and Alice thought that she had never been so happy in her life. In the spring, an event occurred that finally put an end to the story with the relatives. Aunt Rita was released early for good behavior. After serving half her sentence, she was released and immediately came to Alice. Alice was at home, preparing for exams, when the doorbell rang. When she opened the door, she saw Rita. Her aunt had aged greatly over the years, had lost weight, and her hair had turned gray. Alice, she said quietly. What do you want? Alice asked bluntly. Rita lowered her head. Do apologize, she said. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know I regret what I did every day. Really? Alice asked coldly. Really? I had time to think in prison. Victor, Paul, and I behaved like animals. Greed blinded us. We were ready to kill our own niece for money. Rita burst into tears. Forgive me, Alice. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I can't live with this weight on my heart. Alice looked at her silently. She didn't feel anger. Time, and a peaceful life, had smoothed out the rough edges, but there was no pity either. Rita, she said calmly. You tried to kill me. Not to deceive. Not to rob. But to kill. For the sake of money. You were ready to take the life of a girl who did nothing bad to you. And now you want me to forgive you. I don't demand forgiveness. Rita sobbed. I just wanted to say that I am sorry. Okay. You said it. Now go away and don't come back. Rita rose from her chair. I understand, she said. You're right. I don't deserve your forgiveness. She reached the door, then turned around. Alice, I want you to know that your grandfather was a good man, and he did the right thing by leaving everything to you. You deserve this inheritance. After she left, Alice sat in the chair for a long time, thinking about the conversation. Strangely, Rita's visit did not upset her, but rather, on the contrary, finally closed the painful topic of the past. They had received their punishment, realized their guilt, apologized. That's where the story ends. Igor arrived in the evening and immediately noticed her thoughtful mood. What happened? He asked. Alice told him about Rita's visit. Igor listened in silence, then hugged his sister. You did the right thing, he said. Some things cannot be forgiven. You know. I'm not mad at her, Alice admitted. I just understand that we are strangers and have always been strangers. A real family is you, Peterson, my classmates, professors, people who care about each other and don't just think about money. Alice spent the summer interning at a law firm. She was assigned simple cases, consulting clients, preparing documents, studying judicial practice. She liked the work, and management noted her abilities. You have good prospects, said senior partner William N. Smith, after graduating from college. You can count on a position in our office. Thank you, answered Alice. But I want to try to create my own practice, to handle cases for those who cannot afford expensive lawyers. Noble, William grinned. But not very profitable. Not everything in life is measured by money, Alice objected. A new academic year began in the fall. Alice moved to her junior year and already felt like an experienced student. First-year students often turned to her for help, and she was happy to explain complex topics. Among her new acquaintances, Andrew Solovyov stood out, a guy from a neighboring class who studied criminal justice. He was smart, serious and, as it turned out, also wanted to help people, not chase after big fees. We have similar views on our future profession, he once noted after a lecture. Yes, Alice agreed. Although many consider us naive idealists, let them think so. But we will sleep peacefully, knowing that we helped justice. Gradually, a friendship developed between them, which eventually grew into something more. Andrew was the first young man whom Alice trusted completely. She told him her story, and he treated it with understanding and sympathy. You are very strong, he said. Not everyone could survive this and remain a good person. I had a choice, Alice answered. I could become bitter toward the whole world, or draw conclusions and move on. I chose the latter. In their senior year, they were already planning a common future. Andrew proposed traditionally on one knee with a ring and a bouquet of roses. Alice agreed without hesitation. The wedding was modest and intimate. Peterson, Igor, and several close friends from the university But the atmosphere was warm and joyful. Alice was happy that there were people around her who sincerely wished her well. Igor proposed a toast to the newlyweds. To their family being strong and friendly. To justice and mutual support, added Peterson. After the wedding, the newlyweds settled in grandfather's house. Andrew easily fit into their friendly company. The house became even more comfortable with the new family member. They both received their diplomas at the same time. Summa cum laude. At graduation, Alice remembered that 18-year-old girl who, 4 years ago, almost became a victim of her relatives' greed. How much had changed since then? What are you thinking about? Andrew asked, noticing her thoughtfulness. About how amazingly fate works out. Alice answered. Sometimes the most terrible trials lead to the most wonderful results. You mean the story with the inheritance? Not only. If not for those events, I would not have met Peterson. Igor would not have become my real brother. I would not have realized that I wanted to be a lawyer. And most importantly, I would not have learned to appreciate truly good people. A month after graduation, Alice and Andrew opened a legal aid clinic called Justice for All. Peterson became their partner, providing private investigation services. Igor began renovating their office in downtown Detroit. Business didn't take off immediately, but gradually, their client base grew. People who had been turned down by other lawyers because of the complexity of their cases or inability to pay large sums turned to them. Alice and Andrew took on every case if they saw that the person had been truly wronged. We won't get rich this way, Andrew would sometimes say. But we'll be useful, Alice would answer. And money isn't the most important thing in life. She had every reason to think so. Grandfather's inheritance provided a comfortable existence. The house was a warm home. A beloved husband and loyal friends were nearby. What more could you want? One evening, a year after opening the clinic, Alice was sitting in the garden behind the house, reading a court decision on one of their cases. They had won a difficult case. Helped an elderly woman get back her illegally seized apartment. Andrew came out of the house with a cup of coffee. Are you tired? He asked, sitting down next to her. A little. But it's a pleasant tiredness. We did a good deed. You know, Andrew said, looking at the sunset sky. Sometimes, it seems to me that your grandfather foresaw all this. He left you the inheritance for a reason. He knew that you would be able to use it wisely. Alice thought about it. Perhaps her husband was right. Grandfather had always been a wise man. Perhaps he really believed that his granddaughter would not waste the money, but would find a worthy use for it. Thank you, grandfather, she whispered, looking at his portrait in the lighted window of the house. At that moment, Igor came out of the house. Dinner is ready, he called. And Peterson just arrived. Alice smiled and got up from the bench. The house was waiting. The family was gathering at the table. A whole life lay ahead, full of interesting cases, good deeds, and human warmth. A life that she had built herself. Despite all the obstacles and trials, the story of that scared 8-year-old girl who almost fell victim to greed was over. A new story had begun, the story of a strong woman who found her place in the world and knew how to value real wealth, family, friendship, justice, and the opportunity to help other people. As years passed, Alice's legal aid clinic, Justice for All, became well known throughout Detroit. She and Andrew had helped hundreds of people from wrongfully evicted tenants to workers cheated out of their wages. Peterson's investigative skills proved invaluable in uncovering fraud and gathering evidence for their cases. Igor's construction business flourished as well. He had kept his promise to build quality work at fair prices. And word of mouth brought him steady clients. He eventually moved into his own apartment but still came to family dinners every Sunday at the old house on Maple Street. 5 years after their wedding, Alice and Andrew welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Grace, after Alice's grandmother. As Alice held her newborn daughter, she thought about the cycle of life and how her grandfather's love had reached across the years to make this moment possible. She'll never have to worry about having a family who truly loves her, Andrew whispered, watching his wife cradle their baby. No, Alice agreed, tears of joy in her eyes. She'll grow up knowing what real family means. The house that had once stood empty for 11 years was now filled with laughter, love, and the sounds of a growing family. In the living room, grandfather's portrait still hung in its place of honor. And sometimes Alice would catch herself talking to it, updating him on their lives and thanking him for his wisdom, entrusting her with his legacy. The relatives who had tried to steal her inheritance served their full sentences. Paul was the last to be released. And unlike Rita, he never came to apologize. Alice heard through mutual acquaintances that he had moved to another state. Bitter and unchanged. She felt sad for him but no longer carried any anger. On Alice's 30th birthday, as she stood in the same garden where she had once sat as a frightened teenager, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The apple trees her grandfather had planted were now mature and full, providing shade for Grace's playground. The house had been fully renovated and expanded to accommodate their growing family. Any regrets? Andrew asked, joining her with baby Grace in his arms. Alice looked at her husband. Here, daughter. And the home that had weathered so many storms to become a sanctuary of love and justice. Through the window, she could see Igor and Peterson setting up for another of their Sunday dinners, while the walls of her study were lined with awards and thank you letters from clients whose lives had been changed by their work. Not a single one, she said, taking Grace from Andrew's arms. Grandfather knew exactly what he was doing when he left me this inheritance. He wasn't just giving me money and a house, he was giving me the chance to build a life worth living. As the sun set over Detroit, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Alice held her daughter close and whispered the same promise her grandfather had once made to her. You'll always have a home, little one, and you'll always be loved. The legacy of love, justice, and family would continue for generations to come.